Obsidian is an excellent studio. Avowed shows what they can do when budget and time are bountiful. I have spent nearly 50 hours in this little slice of Eora. It is a previously unexplored part of the lands of Pillars of Eternity. Avowed is gorgeous, being the latest Xbox first-party title to push Unreal Engine to its limits. It is a promise fulfilled, one made when Xbox went on an acquisition spree many years ago. Take great studios and support them to become even better. We'll break down how they did that and more in the XboxEra review of Avowed. For those unfamiliar, Avowed takes place in the Living Lands, a wild frontier in the world of Eora, where Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 took place. It is a rich fantasy landscape where souls and gods are real, as death will inevitably lead you to the Wheel of Fate. Eventually, you're spat back out to live a new life, rinse and repeat. It gets a lot deeper than that, of course, especially with how many different endings Pillars 1 and 2 can have. Avowed canonizes certain events while focusing on letting your envoy shape the narrative. By the end of my last play session, I had seen nearly every inch of the island. You will have massive influence over events both during and after your playthrough. You are not simply there to shape a preset narrative like in Dragon Age the Veilguard. While some major events feel pretty likely to occur, the nature of how and why they do can change greatly. Avowed is not a clockwork simulation either like Elder Scrolls. You can't attack people at random, nor is there the nearly endless set of options in something like Baldur's Gate 3. It's pretty much its own beast and most closely and obviously associated with the Outer Worlds if that had way more time and way more budget. I really enjoyed having so much control over the narrative without feeling the choice paralysis that I did in Baldur's Gate 3. As a bit of an RPG chameleon, I enjoyed all of the aforementioned titles in different ways, and I find that in the end, Avowed might be my favorite blend of dialogue, choice, and gameplay out of them all. The game begins with a couple of cutscenes to set the story up. You are a godlike in the envoy of the Adiran Empire. Godlikes are souls touched by a god who claims them. You have never heard your god's voice, which is not normal. The emperor of this war-loving nature that you are a part of has seen something special in you. Taking you under his wing, he eventually sends our envoy to the Living Lands to find out what this Dream Scourge plague is. As any good RPG does, you'll have a comprehensive character creator as your first order of business. There are a handful of presets, and as a lazy boy, I worked heavily off of one of these. Godlikes are easy to spot because they share odd facial and head features. My character had mushrooms and barnacles growing out of his head, alongside some odd facial markings on the eyes. Avowed is a very colorful game at times, but do not let that fool you into thinking that it is a happy one. The people of Eora are known as Kith, and you can choose between humans and elves. There are dwarves and other races who factor heavily into the game, but you can't choose them. With the ability to play in first or third person, I do remember them saying that gear and animations having to change to fit all the races was going to end up being more trouble than they found it worth. I have to say, while the environment work is the game's probably greatest strength besides writing, these character models are a really big step up for Obsidian. They look good and animate extremely well when talking. The character customization overall is solid, with lots to choose from in a wide variety of categories. I can see many hours being lost with for those to create their dream protagonist. Eyes, ears, noses, mouths, and face shapes all offer up a bevy of slider. There's lots of hair choices for both the head and the face, and I have zero complaints about any of it. Once you're happy with your appearance, the final choice is a background with 5 different options available. Those options just give you certain dialogue choices and set your initial attribute points. Lastly, you'll choose a voice, game difficulty of which there are 5. I played on normal, your identifiers, and lastly, your name, though everyone's just going to always call you Envoy. And then you are off to the Living Lands eventually. Your long voyage doesn't go as planned, and you're thrown right into the thick of things. You're on a tutorial island, and it's a fun little slice of life to grind your teeth on as you learn the game's mechanics and how your choices start to matter right off the bat. The first thing that wowed me, though, was the combat. It's really fun. Like, It's so fun, and the main source for that is how impactful everything is. Avowed has 3 class archetypes available to choose abilities from. You've got the fighter, where using a sword and a board or a 2-hand weapon, you will smash the front lines while yelling often. Rangers stay in the back, using bows and or guns to pick enemies off. And finally, you've got the wizard, my preferred choice by the game's end. You're a spell-flinging fool who can vary between casting and conjuring weapons as you please. And you are never locked into your choices for class ability unlocks or skill attributes, because at any time, you can reset both trees for the cost of some coin. It's not a lot early on, kinda ends up being a lot later. It was annoying because it was like 2,500 gold by the end for each one, which even at the very end of the game was still quite a bit. And normally in an RPG, you could just grind. But Avowed has 2 issues that hindered my enjoyment of testing out new builds. Enemies don't seem to respawn, and the gear progression system itself is the game's weakest point, and I'll touch on that in a bit. But back to the combat, no matter which class abilities you choose, everything feels really good. Whether it's a 2-handed mace to the face or a magic missile flying out of your wand, the feedback is as satisfying as I can remember in this type of game. Avowed is a single-player only RPG where, once you've unlocked them, you will always have 2 NPC companions alongside you. And while you will only ever directly control your envoy from either the first or third person, you can pause combat to activate companion abilities at any time. Similar to your character, every few times you level, your companions get ability points. All 4 have 4 nodes to choose from, with 3 being active abilities and the 4th being a passive buff. As far as your ability trees are concerned, you have no hope of ever maxing one out, let alone fully multiclassing. I was level 28 by the time my game ended, and I had tried out every combo I could think of. Dual pistol ranger, a tank fighter, ice wizard, and many more. By the end, my wizard focused on healing myself while dealing damage, and using control spells to empower my area of effect abilities. Let's go over some of those abilities and attributes real quick. The fighter tree has 19 abilities, 4 of them are active and 15 are passive modifiers. Your active abilities are Charge, Barbaric Shout, Into the Fray, and Clear Out. Charge is exactly what you think, you just run into things and knock the shit out of them. Barbaric Shout is to make yourself stronger and interrupt guys around you. Into the Fray is pretty cool, it's kind of like a force yank, pulling enemies into your face. And Clear Out has you spin like an idiot in place, though you're carrying very dangerous weapons, so it really hurts. Rangers have 18 abilities, 4 are active, 14 are passive. You've got Tanglefoot, which holds foes in place and poisons them if you spec into it further. Shadowing Beyond, where you go invis at the cost of essence, which is your mana the entire time. Bear Ally, where you call in a big old spectral bear to beat the crap out of people. And Flurry of Blows, which is not a series of punches, instead it just sees you gain maximum attack speed, rapid stamina regen, and it can even give you lifesteal at rank 2 and last for up to 15 seconds. Now, wizards have a lot. They've got 33 abilities, with 23 of them being active spells and 10 of them being passive. Not going to list out every spell, but they all fall into a handful of types. You've got your kinetic purple stuff, your blue ice stuff, your red fire stuff, your green poison stuff, and your also darker blue electricity stuff. Each variety of spell has their direct attack, a close range AoE, targeted circle of AoE, and elemental specific variations. The higher rank you get, the more fancy your animations go to. My favorites were lightning attacks for AoE, while using ice as my main crowd control element. Alongside all of those abilities, which can be mixed and matched however you want as you unlock them, a new tier every 5 levels are your godlike abilities. There are a number of these, though I don't think you can unlock all of them in a single playthrough. Some are available no matter what, others depend entirely on choices you make during the campaign. My favorite was the first one, a heal that could revive down allies, and others are things like passive buffs for extra health, stamina, or essence. And it's all in service of how good Avowed feels to play. On both console and PC, I spent the majority of my time on console, shifting to PC when the mood hit me. Combat is a frenetic dance full of blocking, parrying, and dodging. To do those moves or attacks, you will need stamina. Wands, swords, and guns all alike require that stamina to use, and you do not have a lot of it early on. Abilities and spells require essence, which can only be restored with food or potions by default. To help with this, you can get passive items or use your attribute points. Those attributes go into Might, which gives you extra damage or carrying capacity, Constitution, which is maximum health and poison and bleed resistance, Dexterity, which is extra attack, speed, and action speed, Perception, which is extra critical hit chance and maximum range, Intellect, which is maximum essence and elemental resistance, and finally, Resolve, which ups your stamina and second wind efficiency. Second wind is a cooldown on every time you get taken down the first time. You get right back up with a certain amount of health depending on your resolve. But that if you're on cooldown and die again, well, then you're just dead. And those stats not only add passive bonuses to your character, but they are also crucial to certain dialogue choices. If you don't have enough might, you might not be able to intimidate a foe into backing down. A lack of intellect means you'll have no clue how to reason with certain scenarios and etc. These attributes can be rerolled at any time for any cost, and by the end it again was a whopping 2,500 coins, which kinda hurt. The game really encourages you to experiment, but in its launch state, that can be a daunting task because of said costs. Not only does it become prohibitively expensive to respec, but the game's upgrade system for gear is also difficult to navigate at times. There are 5 levels of gear quality. You've got common, fine, exceptional, superb, and legendary. Each has 3 levels of upgrade before you can go from, say, common up to fine. All require zone-specific items to level up, and those appear to be a finite resource, making it kinda hard to test things out once you're past a certain point of the game. You can have 2 sets of weaponry at any time using the Y button to jump between them, but I kinda found it hard to keep every slot upgraded at the same time and ended up sticking with one main loadout. To upgrade an item from one level to the next will take dozens of items, many of which are tied to exploring for loot chests, and after 10 hours of playing, I knew that my best bet for gear upgrades would be to only upgrade my main weapon and then just buy the other items I needed once I hit a new area. It felt like drops for that new tier of item only really started once you had acquired it. Trying to upgrade my armor, main hand, and offhand, along with the second set of weapons you can change to, started to feel a bit like a burden. Instead of spending gold where I wanted to, I just ended up hoarding it to replace items, only upgrading specific unique ones that had passive modifiers that I liked. Most gear in the game is just common sword or exceptional wand, but there are unique named items that have extra passive buffs on them that you can get a little bit of tuning on in camp. To do any of these, you have to go to said camp where in a few places per map, you can talk with your party, upgrade items, and do various other activities. By the end of the game, I found the entire gear system to be a slog, knowing that the moment I was done with one of the game's 5 main environments, I would be vastly underpowered if I didn't stick with my current ability and stats setup. Thankfully, everything else about this game is really damned good. And it's not all combat, of course. This is an Obsidian RPG, and their writing is as sharp as ever. Humor in video games is very hard to do, and once again, they have nailed it. Avowed is not a happy game, though neither is it a dour one. The writing walks a fine line between seriousness and levity, with a healthy dose of wit. Your character has a mandate, but you can shape the person that they are. You want to be a full-on prick? You can be, though I admit, it hurt my soul to do so on the rare occasion. And there is a golden path for the main quest, though I think the gear issues I just talked about will make it tough to solely focus on anything above or even on normal difficulty. The side quests are mainly fetch quests in their mechanics, though never lesser in their writing quality. You'll come across them with both the classic exclamation point above a character's head on the minimap, or as a natural part of a seemingly random conversation. And like the conversations, questing feels natural in Avowed. Being an errand boy is occasionally called out in subtle, hilarious ways. And the game does not attempt to radically shift how questing works, instead honing in on the strongest parts of that setup. You are an important person, and you'll shape cities, settlements, and entire regions with the choices you make. There are no in-game UI elements to tell you what your reputation is. Instead, the people of an area will either like or loathe you, depending on the fate your choices foisted upon them. You can save at nearly any time, and I did a bit of scumming to see how differently things could play out in the short term. Turns out quite a bit. Choices you make early on will also reflect far down the line. This is no Baldur's Gate 3, with an engine spending years building up to offer nearly endless choices. You do have a lot of options, but they're limited to the imaginations of the game's writers in the end. And what starts as a simple diplomatic mission to an untamed land quickly turns into something far grander, if you so choose. Are you going to be a loyal subject to the crown, looking solely for the Empire's best interests? Maybe you fall in love with the local people, putting them first in all major decisions. And in the end, maybe none of that matters to you at all as envoy, and instead you choose the path of least responsibility. And it's a slow build-up, as nearly every conversation you have can potentially shape the narrative. It is obvious at times, and very subtle at others. How things will play out is rarely clear, and I found myself repeatedly adapting to unexpected outcomes. No matter what you're doing or where you are, it is routinely gorgeous to behold. To answer the major question everyone had about Xbox's version of this game, it does have multiple performance modes. On Series X, you get 30, 40, and 60 FPS modes. Series S gets 30 and 40. Both the 30 and 40 can be unlocked, but 40 is only available if you have a 120Hz display, and I would only recommend unlocking it if you have VRR, or variable refresh rate, as an option. Both the 30 and 40 FPS modes have ray tracing enabled on consoles. The 60 FPS mode does lose ray tracing and appears to have lower lighting, shadow, and level of detail settings. I primarily played the Series X version unlocked at 40 FPS. It looked cleaner and higher quality than 60, while feeling a hell of a lot better to control than 30. PC version was a bit of an odd duck, as my 7900 XTX and 5800X combo struggled with ray tracing on or off using FSR 3, even in performance mode. Overall, it kind of felt like no matter what I changed, the game looked and ran pretty similar. I was at 4K with 120 FPS target, but seemed to generally average 60 to 80 FPS no matter what I changed from low to high. The variance was almost nothing, and I don't know, maybe it's better on the Steam version. But, thankfully, no matter what I set or where I played, Avowed looked gorgeous. Character models and material work are probably Obsidian's best yet, with facial animations during talking that are up there with the heavyweights of the genre. Animations are good, though occasionally a bit stilted during transitional periods. As stated previously, you can play the game entirely in first or third person. On PC, you'll press the U button, and on console, you'll hold in the right stick to go between them. I think I spent like 99% of my time in first person, preferring the immersion. And Avowed has a surprising amount of platforming. It's easy to do in either perspective, and you are surprisingly light on your feet. Unless you are over-encumbered, and thankfully only weapons and armor count for weight, you will always move fast. Ranger, fighter, wizard, you're all quick, with the ranger having abilities to stay at max speed more often. Also, beautifully, jumping and running do not use up stamina, which makes exploring and platforming way more enjoyable. And your envoy is an expert climber, quickly mantling with the best parkour runners France can offer. The living lands are chopped up into 6 distinct playable areas if you include the tutorial island. Each area is a hub zone with no real open world checklist or feel. To quickly get around and see the sights, you'll unlock fast travel checkpoints and various party camps that you can pretty much always visit in the game's beautiful map via fast travel. And speaking of that map and the way the world looks, Avowed's art style is awesome, going for a stylized yet colorful look that I think will hold up for a long time. And the initial CGI trailer might not have matched this final aesthetic, but it did hit the actual feel of the living lands. It is a vast, beautiful, and terrifying biome, full of life, death, destruction, and infection. There are forests, swamps, deserts, and more as you trek from area to area. I did choose to fast travel early and often, because you kind of got to go everywhere by foot. There are no mounts, and once I'd run across a map for an hour, I was very happy to instantly jump from place to place. And of course, while combat traversal and graphics are all great, my favorite part is probably the writing. Obsidian has long been lauded for their dialogue and world building, and again they have knocked it out of the park as they further build up the world they started in Pillars of Eternity. For Eeyore and Norris enthusiasts out there, there is a ton to digest. And as time passes and all the different choices become available to read online, I know I'm going to be diving back in to see where the franchise can go from here. Throughout the game, you will unlock 4 party members, 2 of whom can be active at once. Kai is a former mercenary, Marius is a ranger and guide, Giata is an animancer, aka one who wields the power of souls as an energy source, and finally Yatzli is a small firecracker of a wizard whose tongue is sharper than any steel. You cannot talk to your party members outside of camp, so every now and then you're going to see a little icon pop up on the bottom left of the screen letting you know that they have new things to talk about. It is always worth going back and exhausting all options as you advance the excellent story. Eventually I hit a point with Kai where he offered me training, and I gained permanent +2 bonus to my might. It's cool shit like that. I don't want to spoil too much, so I will just say that your character isn't the only one that will grow and change as the story progresses. Each companions have their own arc, and I felt the friendship between all of us was earned by the game's end. Though, if you're the type who loves playing the asshole, the options were always there to tell my party members to eat shit if I so wanted. There's no greater good at all times altruism in this game. Excellent writing can only go so far, and thankfully the audio in Avowed is just as good. Every companion and major character is well voiced. Deborah Wilson is a standout as the menacing leader of the Steel Garrote Legion. Each companion voice actor was a solid choice, instantly drawing me into their relationships I was sure to forge. And the OST is a rousing orchestral score, though it didn't really have a super memorable main theme. Lastly, I only ran into a couple of bugs in my over 47 hours, which is kind of a miracle for the genre. The main ones were side quest markers that either led to nothing or just refused to allow me to interact with the NPC that were above. Both times it happened, it was in the second zone of the game, and in-game events had kind of changed things up there, so I wasn't sure if the quests were there before things changed or not, but no matter what, I could not start those quests, and I have no idea if there's going to be a day 1 patch or not, so who knows? Wrapping things up, I think Avowed is an excellent game. One major issue keeps it from being an all-timer for me, with the gear progression system being so restrictive at launch. They can patch that though, and I hope they do, as the rest of the game is awesome. Obsidian's top-tier writing has finally been matched with the gorgeous visuals and satisfying gameplay we always wanted. This one, of course, is available on day 1 on Xbox Game Pass, or, well, you might call it day 5 because it is coming out on the 13th for Premium Edition owners, which is the day that this video goes up. But I highly recommend it, no matter where you are.